Hey everyone, it's Stranger Grayson here. Welcome back to another horror movie review. Today I'm going to be continuing the Friday the 13th franchise. And before I get ahead of myself, I want to say that I am collaborating with a friend of mine named Strange Michael. And he is a really well-known Goosebumps YouTuber in the Goosebumps community. He actually got shout-outed by Bjorn one time. He's an Australian Goosebumps YouTuber. He's probably the most popular one out of all of them, which I thought was really amazing. However, he does also have a horror movie channel that he does tons of reviews on. And this is the first time me and him have actually collaborated on YouTube, like on a whole series. We might have collaborated on like a book, but it was like this is the first time we've collaborated on like a whole horror franchise. And definitely check him out. He's a really cool guy. I'll leave a link to his channel in the description below. Really should check him out. Me and him are doing the Friday the 13th franchise. And the movie I'm reviewing today, he's like a day behind me. He did part 2 today. And today I'm doing Friday the 13th part 3, 3D. Now, this movie, I have mixed feelings about. It's not a terrible film. It's not a great film. This movie was released a year after part 2. And this was during the time of like the 3D era movie things. You had Amityville 3D. You had Jaws 3D. You had a few other 3D horror movies out there. And 80s was like the era of like trying new things and getting 3D stuff because the third dimension was amazing. And Friday the 13th, of course, wanted to take part in that, which honestly, probably one of the weirdest things you could do. But they decided to make a 3D film. And of course, with it being part 3, they just called it Friday the 13th 3D or Friday the 13th part 3 3D. I'm just going to call it part 3 because the 3D aspect really doesn't work in this movie, which I would delve into that in a second. But Friday the 13th part 3, 3D, what is it about? Part 3 takes place, I think like a year or so after the first film. Actually, no. It takes place within the same night as part 2. I think it's like the day after. I don't really follow the whole timeline thing. It doesn't really work. Like the MCU and DCU, yeah, that I get, but the whole timeline for Friday the 13th is kind of messed up. So I believe this movie takes place right after part 2, like a day after. Because we open up with a scene where this couple owns like this marketplace. It's like a little dine-in type of thing out in the middle of nowhere on the main road. And she is very abusive to her husband. I gotta be honest, like verbally, not like physically. She's just like verbally abusive. But on the TV, they see what happened after the events of part 2 at Packanack Lodge. And we see the sole survivor, Jenny from part 2. However, I believe that Paul survived because the body count doesn't add up if you add Paul, and we never actually see a body. So I assume that Paul survived. I'm really hoping he did survive. Anyway, they see what happened on the TV, said they cannot find the killer. While this is going on, she eventually goes outside to get the laundry, and of course Jason is sneaking about. She thinks it's her husband. Then some more stuff happens. Husband goes to use the bathroom. He opens the door and Jason comes out, kills him, and then eventually the wife. Then the next day, the following morning, we cut to our main group of characters. Chris is obviously the final girl of this film. She is sort of the main protagonist. Then we get to meet a few of her friends named Andy, Debbie, Chuck, and Julie, and Shelly, who is like the Ted of part 2, and he's obviously the jokester of this film. I gotta be honest, he's very annoying. He really is. They're going to pick up his date, Vera, which Andy, Shelly's roommate, got him with. So they pick her up, they head to Chris's cabin, and the place is called Higgins Haven. It's like a lake cabin, sort of like a family hangout place. She hasn't been there in over 2 years, and she finally gets back there. She also meets her boyfriend, Rick, who they kind of grown distant from each other, but they eventually do get back halfway through the film. One thing I do like about this film is how we finally get a break from the camps. You know, we had Crystal Lake, and then we had Packanack Camp. Now we have a lake house out on the lake, which is a good change of pace for once. I do like seeing getting away from like the camps and stuff. We still are on a lake, but at least it's a different change of scenery. And while this is going on, Jason follows them to their place, and you can see him sneaking around. We still get that, it's not a first-person point of view anymore because we obviously know it's Jason, but we don't actually get to see his face until later on. But you do get to see like the stealthiness of how he sneaks around in a barn, and I do like the camera shots where people will be walking around and then you can see Jason in like the very back, like hidden in the shadows. I do like that aspect. But anyway, while they are getting everything set up and moving in for the weekend, Jason is sneaking around. Then, of course, we need to have, or they try to have this other plot line for, or side plot where Shelly and Vera go to the store. They run into these bikers. The bikers get pissed off at him because of a reason. I won't tell you why. Then they follow him to their place, and Jason picks off the bikers. Then after that, he starts picking off our group of victims, our group of friends. Friday the 13th Part 3 was definitely an interesting one. It had a better budget than Part 2, I'm pretty sure. And the main group of characters I could relate to a little more, and I found them a little bit more enjoyable. Not as much as I thought I would, but they were all right. I think the ones I really liked were Debbie, Chris, and Rick. Shelly I did not like. The bikers, you know, they were there to just like get the plot moving. They were all right. Jason in this film this is definitely his better interpretation than Part 2. He finally gets the hockey mask in this film. Won't tell you how he gets it. I would just tell you it does involve one of our characters. And the aspect of Jason and how bulky he looks is amazing. The guy who plays Jason, Richard Brooker, he did an amazing job playing him. The kills in this film definitely were an upgrade. Not by much, but they were an upgrade. However, the 3D aspect of this movie definitely did ruin some moments for me. Some of the kills were shot in 3D. A lot of shots were in 3D, especially in the beginning. I just didn't like that. It didn't work. Even in 3D, I was told it doesn't really work all that much. It just doesn't. There is better 3D movies out there than this film. So yeah, the 3D aspect did kind of ruin the film for me in some points. The ending was also another huge drop. They copied the same thing they did with Part 1 and Part 2. Not fully. I do think this is a little bit better than Part 2's ending, but it's not as good as Part 1's ending. I gotta be honest, out of the Final Girls, Chris has probably been my least favorite one. It's just her whole subplot with like meeting Jason before, and it doesn't really add up to where this movie takes place in the timeline, like how she met Jason. I didn't understand that, how it made sense. And she just screamed a lot, and it got annoying. It just wasn't very entertaining when it was just her and Jason. But like her whole relationship with Rick, I did think that was pretty interesting. And she does put up an alright fight. It wasn't as good as Jenny did. I still think Jenny is probably the best Final Girl so far that I've seen. But she still did put up an alright fight. Other than that, this movie was lacking in a lot of areas, but I do have a lot of nostalgic feel because this film was the first Friday the 13th movie I watched, and then part one. So this film in part one does hold a nostalgic feel to me. So I do think nostalgia kind of wins this for me. It's probably getting the same rating as part two. It's kind of mostly on the same page as part two. Honestly, if I had to pick one, I definitely would pick this film, but part two did have some good moments. So that has been my review on Friday the 13th part 3. Very solid film. The 3D does kind of ruin it, but still had a very decent plot, and Jason Richard Brooker does an amazing performance, and I do think Chris is an alright final girl. If I had to rate it on a scale of 1 to 10, I'd probably give it about an 8, maybe 8.5, depends. This does have some nostalgia for me, and I do like the cover art that they chose for this. I really would love to hear Michael's thoughts on the film, because from what I saw in his part 2 review, he despised it the last time he saw it, but I'm really hoping his opinion does change a little. Anyway, this has been my review on Friday the 13th part 3. Let me know your thoughts down in the comment section down below. Would love to hear your thoughts on the film. Please go check out Michael. Does an amazing job. And before I do end this film, my other friend, horror movie reviewer or horror channel review, he is doing a little bit review, but me and Michael have kind of already started doing this. If you do want to check him out, I'll leave a link to his channel though. He really is a good guy. But thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you in the next Friday the 13th movie review. God bless and have a good day. Bye, everyone.